Morning, everyone. Hope you're all well. As usual, another beautiful day up here in the Wolds. Not quite boiling hot, so the dog is pretty chill with a walk. So I thought it would be time for me to do just a little bit of a dog walk video. But there's not an awful lot to talk about in terms of Lincoln City at the moment. I'm pretty chill with that. Yeah, there's other things that we can be looking at and we can be listening to. And I think it's a good time to pay attention to the wider football world, which is what I do for a living. And there are a few things that have popped up that I think are newsworthy and worth talking about, particularly from a Lincoln City point of view. And it all actually stems back, and this will probably be a surprise to many, to our so-called rivals, Peterborough United, who I kind of want to make, not the crux of this conversation today, but the kind of jumping off point, depending on how long I get to talk before the dog gets bored, just about the state of football, the wider world of football. So there are a couple of things I think that Peterborough United have really been stung with over the past couple of months. And if it was us, we'd be absolutely gutted. We really would. And when you think about when I'm going to talk about what I'm going to talk about, you'll understand what I mean. So there were two players that were in line for promotion in the Championship. I think it's Mason Clark at Coventry and Harrison Burrows at Sheffield United, both of whom were beaten by last-minute goals by Sunderland, both of whom therefore didn't go up, and that cost Peterborough United quite a lot of money because they had significant Premier League promotion bonuses. That's football, and I can understand that. Darren McAntony, a figure who I actually have quite a bit of time for. He's a different type of chairman to ours, perhaps. But his Hard Truth podcast is really good. It's the only podcast I really listen to other than Under the Cosh. I was going to say my own, but I don't listen to that. Really good. And it's the last edition that he did at the beginning of June kind of goes into the cost implications there and how tough it can be for a team like Peterborough and therefore like us, who are kind of trying to operate on this model of developing and selling players, to be in the lap of football gods, nothing more. So yeah, it was really interesting, and for me that it kind of the conversation that Dara has kind of goes along the lines of there's no such thing as a model as such. You can be a club that tries to spend massively to get out of a division, which is a hide into nothing, or you can be one that tries to do things differently. And yeah, Peterborough do things a little differently to us, and he goes into their transfer approach. But actually, there are some huge similarities between the two clubs. I mean, he was very critical of Hector Cipriano, who he offered a bigger deal to, allegedly, than the guy took at Watford. But then that does also prove a little bit that it's not always about money. It's about players wanting to test themselves. But they've lost some players this summer, and we've lost some players as well. But the two players I actually want to talk about them losing, and I know there'll be a lot of people out there who will laugh at this because, you know, local rivalry, they're a team we don't like, all of that sort of stuff. But if you strip it away and put it in as if it was us, we'd be fuming. Ricky J. Jones and Kwame Poku. So Ricky J. Jones and Kwame Poku allegedly both had opportunities to move into the Championship. They were both out of contract. They were both protected by the under-24 rule. So if they moved on to a Championship club, they would go through either the PFCC, as we were likely to with JJ McKiernan, and we were likely to with Sean Rowan, or, as Dara said, we'll have conversations with those clubs and agree a deal, which is exactly what happened with us and Sean Rowan. However, Ricky J. Jones has opted to move to St. Pauli in Germany. I mean, on paper, by the way, what a great move, moving from the third tier of English football to the Bundesliga. But he had allegedly a deal tied up with a Championship club. Dara, in his conversation, was delighted that a player that they had since he was 9 years old and had come through the academy was going to move to the Championship. They would be hugely protected. You're talking a 7-figure sum here. Bear in mind, we expected to get maybe 400,000 at the PFCC tops for Sean Rowan. For Ricky J. Jones, you've got twice as much development on that because he was there when he was 9 rather than Sean coming over when he was 16. They're going to get a fraction of that now because FIFA rules, cross-border rules, as we know from our own fears of Sean moving to Hearts are particularly unfair, or not particularly unfair, but they're not as stringent and not as protective of the selling club or the club that the player's departing from. But Kwame Poku was another who high-end championship offers was the discussion on the Hard Truth podcast. Birmingham was certainly mentioned. Dara said he's a player that could be in the Premier League in a couple of years. If they do a deal with a club again, you were talking a significant fee, because bear in mind they paid a significant fee to Colchester, but it would also then be the additional sell-ons, all that sort of stuff, which we allegedly got for Sean Rowan. I don't know the exact details, but it sounds like we've got in excess of kind of $500,000 to 650,000 in terms of upfront and add-ons plus a sell-on fee. So for Poku, for something like that, they were hoping he'd be the next Ivan Toney, go into one club, huge big money move to another club, and it sets Peterborough up for another round of their speculation, because that's what they do, by the way. They speculate. And people will, Lincoln fans look at Peterborough and go, why can't we sign an Ivan Toney or a Kwame Poku or a Ricky Jones? Well, Ricky Jones came through their academy, but Hector Cipriani. But there are risks associated with that. And for every signing that they make, there's signings like Chris Conn-Clark that haven't worked out at first, who may. There are signings who don't work out, like an Alex Woodyard, for instance. So they have as many misses in the transfer market as they do hits. And so when we're being critical of Lincoln's recruitment, which is why I fell out with a huge number of Twitter followers in February, because I was stringently defending our transfer policy, because somebody, I think, made a ridiculous hyperbolic statement that for every one good signing, there was 5 bad signings. Utter bullshit. But even if for every one good signing, there was 1 bad signing, it's still actually not a terrible hit rate if that good signing was an Ivan Toney and the bad signing was an Alex Woodyard or something along those lines. So Peterborough, we do set them up at Lincoln City as a kind of example of what we want to do well. But this summer, there's all these examples of how it can actually backfire. And if it was Lincoln, the conversation would be, why didn't we tie them down to more contract? Why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that? And I am going to admit and confess right now to feeling hugely sorry for Darren McAntony and for Peterborough United. And I thought his latest Hard Truth podcast, and he hasn't done one since Poku and Ricky J. Jones made these moves. He's spoken on TalkSport, but he hasn't done a Hard Truth. But I thought he gave a fascinating insight into another club's finances, because something else that Lincoln fans tend to do is say, we're the only ones that talk about budget. We're the only ones that talk about being priced out. We're the only ones that put stock in this, that, and the other. And that's patently it's just not true. And anyone that takes the time to listen to Dara, particularly the last episode, will understand that actually Peterborough operate under the same sort of pressures as we do. And he was talking about this particular transfer window being tough. He said it may be better with Wrexham, but at the time, Wrexham and Birmingham not in it. He said, but at the time of recording, which was the 1st of June, the same things were happening again. He said 3 or 4 years ago, every player they went in for, the agent would say, Ipswich are in for him, and they're offering him this because Ipswich are the big spenders. This summer, it's MK Dons. Now, make no mistake, MK Dons are going hard in League Two. And I know that we'll be here going, no, it's League Two, fuck it, who cares? It will become a problem for us if they come up, because they are spending big. I think they've just taken Aaron Collins from MK Dons. They've taken Mendes Lang from Derby. There's talk about them taking McGoldrick. I mean, they're making signings for not promotion, but title. They want to win the title. They want to come back up. They're going big at it. And Dara said this summer he's going for a player, and he brings an agent. The agent will say MK Dons for him, because they're the benchmark. They're the ones that want to spend the money. Now, look, we get a level of openness from Jez and Liam, but they are particularly candid around certain player details and certain finance levels. And, rightly or wrongly, some people say it's transparency that they come on and talk. Some people say it's a lack of transparency when they hold back on going so far. They don't talk about specific numbers. Dara does, and he's talking about players being worth 2, 3, 4K a week. And I think that feels like a benchmark for us. Anybody that thinks a Kwame Poku or Ricky J. Jones is on 8 or 9 grand a week just because they're at Peterborough is dreaming. There are clubs that pay that. Wrexham, Birmingham, Blackpool this year, reportedly, or I'm led to believe Fraser Horsfall is on around the 9K a week mark. He's just left Stockport. He's been given a 4-year deal at the age of 28. Madness. Utter madness. So there you go. Blackpool have stuck their line in the Sam Nyson early. Are they this year's Rotherham? They've got the lad who's at Sheffield Wednesday, was at Rotherham as well, whose name I always can't pronounce, but said this will kill Lincoln when he was at Tranmere. He's gone there, 3-year deal, big money. And it was just really interesting to see that we see Peterborough as big spenders. And as Dara pointed out, yes, in the transfer market they are, because they make the money back so they can spend the transfer fees on bringing in the best of the non-league footballers like the Pocus. But for every Poco, there's an Ajiboy. One that doesn't work out. It was something that I thought was really interesting. And I think sometimes we have a distorted view of the transfer market because we're Lincoln. So you look at your own house and don't look at the wider market implications. And there was discussion again from McAntony, and I kind of referenced him really heavily this morning. But he was saying how clubs aren't making signings at the moment because certainly clubs like us and clubs like Peterborough, because the value for money is not there. Because at this moment in time, there's no pressure. Players are away on holiday. Agents can basically say what they want. Big clubs are spending, so there's a precedent there for a Blackpool and an MK Dons and teams like that. So agents could just sit there and go, my player's worth $5,000 a week. And guarantee you now, Lincoln City won't pay $5,000 a week for a player. They won't pay $4,000 a week for a player. My understanding is the highest earner is on little over $3,000 a week, but generally I don't think that would be a norm. And that goes back to the key theory. People were saying, "Oh, you got players on $3,000 a week." It was madness, and fans' perception of wages is often wrong. And there's not an awful lot of players, and there aren't that many players rather at Peterborough, from what was being said, that are on $3,000 and $4,000 a week. But perception is that they're big spenders because they spend the transfer fee, and there is that kind of separation between transfer fee and wages. Last year Wrexham fans were saying, "Well, we haven't spent the transfer fees, so we're not big spenders." But the wages are the hidden fees, aren't they? The wages are the hidden spend. You can spend nothing on transfer fees and be the biggest spender in the division, but people don't see that. Now, I was critical of MK Dons. They were planning a club record fee. I can't remember for the player now, and I did an opinion piece on it the other day for the Real EFL, and I got loads of hate. We've sold this player, we've sold that player, we're entitled to spend our money. But it really isn't about the transfer fee. It's about the wages, and it's about how that then distorts the market, not just for one club, not just for a club in your division, but across the whole board. And I think that's why, as I said a minute ago, just kind of circling back, that there hasn't been any movement at the minute. Because for a club like us, we need a left back. Yep. If this season kicked off tomorrow, what else do we need? What else would we fundamentally need if our squad had to go on the field tomorrow and play a game of football? We'd need a left back. Other than that, nada. We'd be fine. We'd be all right. Even with Pordy not coming back, and even with Sean going, and play Wickens in goal, Derica at right back, got excuse me, Adam Jackson, Tom Hamer. He could play, arguably, if he were fit, Dom Jeffries at left back, but left back's the one question. In the midfield, it's McGrandles, it's Arahan, it's Hamilton, it's Bayliss, it's McKiernan. For what? We're going to play like two midfielders in the 10 position. Ben House, potentially McKiernan, potentially Bayliss, Jack Moylan, out wide, Eric Ring, Grover McCarmer, Dom Jeffries up top, Rob Street, James Collins, Freddie Draper. We'd be fine. So why do we need to make signings now? And some people, every summer I do this, by the way. Every summer I go, I saw someone on internet saying, let's get our summer up and running right now, blah, blah, blah. We could do with a signing, blah, blah, blah. And that, everyone knows it pisses me off, because making signings now isn't always the best value. Some of the best signings that we've made have been made right close to the eve of the season. Neil Erdley only officially signed a deal the day before we played Wickham on our season opener. One of our best players. Yes, you can get your business done early. Some of our earliest business has been really good. Pordy O'Connor a couple of years ago. But we also got Charles Vernham in that window. Depends if you can get value for money. And I think that's one thing our club is good at. Is getting the value for money. 1 second. Charlie, should we go back? We're good at getting value for money from the players that we bring in. I generally believe that. And I know people call me club-centric and rose-tinted, all of that stuff. But I think generally we have more hits than misses. Generally we have more good winders than bad winders. And anyone who tries to tell me otherwise, I'll go, well, last transfer window we brought in James Collins, who averaged a 20 goal a season. He scored, 10? The window before we brought in Joe Taylor, did the same. The window in between that, by the way, we brought in Rob Street, who went off and averaged, 25 goals a season. He got 12, I think, in his half season at Doncaster. So actually, we're not making bad signings. And people might go, well, JJ McKinnon hasn't impacted us yet. No, Kwame Poku wasn't a massive impact in his first season at Peterborough. People might say Eric Ring hasn't been a big impact. Actually, I think he got 4 goals in 12, 13 appearances. He had a decent impact if he didn't settle. Transfers aren't always immediate. Transfers aren't always, they don't always hit. It's a little bit like buying video games, isn't it? You buy a video game, you sit down, play it for an hour, you can't really get into it. But it's a grower, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours in, you find yourself getting into it. Whereas there are some video games that die away. Oh God, Assassin's Creed, the most recent one. Got right into it for the first hour or two, but now, my God, just dragging a bit. Some players are like that. Some players come out of the blocks firing and then kind of disappear. So I think we've had good winders. You look at the last window, Tom Bayliss had quite decent impact. And okay, I get it. There's players like you, Tyler Walkers, who you sign are a bit of a risk, but that's transfer business. If you're going to judge our recruitment team, and it's not just Jez who signs players, it's a whole recruitment team. But if you're going to judge them on their failures, you have to take into account their successes. And sometimes that's the hard thing to do, isn't it? To look and balance. But I just thought it was really interesting, the whole Peterborough thing. And, I do feel for them. I mean, imagine having 2 players that you think are going to bring in, not like with Sean Rowan, like 500,000, or not even with an Ethan around where you think you might get a million maybe. But you've got 2 players there that over the course of their career until they move on could net you 3, 4, 5 million in total. And they go away. Poku's now, I think, closing in on the deal to Rangers. You can understand the exasperation that Peterborough would have, because they've already put a line in the sand and said they'll be big spenders this summer on transfer fees, because I think that was probably based on the fact that what they thought they were going to expect. Kyprianou's another one where they feel really done by him, because they could have sold him last summer and they chose not to. They chose to keep him. And Dara said it was bad business. It's bad business now, because I kept him from a football perspective. And he just ran his contract down and has walked away for free. He said, should have given him 3 years plus 1, triggered the 1 year deal, could still have sold him and got the money. I like that candid approach from a chairman to a degree in saying that there was an error. I understand sometimes players won't sign the extra year. Sometimes an agent gets involved. I get all of that. But it was just a really fascinating insight. Anybody who, that is, and dead like a rat. Anybody who wants to be critical of what we're trying to do needs to listen to those podcasts and needs to understand that when clubs are talking about budget, it isn't just us. It's Peterborough talking about what other clubs are spending. Exeter City's manager the other day talking about budgets as well. It is a thing. If your club's not talking about budget, they're spending big. That's what I think. So you don't hear Wycombe talking about budget an awful lot, because they're outspending teams and trying to get up. Wycombe, Blackpool, clubs that we see, I think, in our competitive cohort. So we see a Wycombe and a Blackpool and think they're the sort of teams that we want to be in and around. If you finish above Wycombe and Blackpool next season, you're going to be within touching distance of the top 6 after 46 games. That's my prediction. That's what I believe. If you finished above both this season, you would be the same. So they're where we're aiming for. So we're aiming to be in the same cohort as a club that can spend £9,000 a week on a central defender who last season was in League One in Fraser Horsfall. Good player, I'm absolutely sure about it. Look at the signings that Wycombe are making, or trying to make. There's money there again. They're trying to get out of this division and they're trying to throw money at it to do so. It's not always a route to success. Bristol Rovers fans will tell you that. Peterborough last season, not huge in terms of wages, a little bit of a poorer squad, and what happened? They were hammered. Worst Peterborough side we've ever seen. That's what Lincoln fans were saying. And they didn't have a good season because comparatively, spend-wise, they were spent a little bit more than us. I think, I can't remember where they were actually in the wages. Might have been in and around us. But they're a club that are run very similar to us, just with a better track record of producing players, and therefore are more likely to attract the younger players. If you're a player wanting to come out non-league at the minute, you look at, and this is no criticism, but you look at Lincoln City or you look at Peterborough United, where do you go? Do you go to Peterborough United, where Poku's moved on and other players have come out non-league and moved on? Or do you go to Lincoln, where Charlie Kendall's come out of non-league, done all right, Ben House has come out non-league and done all right. Charlie Kendall's come out non-league and not done so well. No criticism of us. It's just clubs get reputations for certain things. We do develop players. We have a record of developing players from certain positions and certain places. If you're a young player coming over from Ireland, I would think that probably you'd look at Lincoln City and go, that's the place to go. But Lincoln and Peterborough, we are very similar in many respects. I mean, obviously, we've got better ground, better manager, better fans, obviously. But we're really similar. And the disappointment that they've had this summer, they've got to look to bounce back from it. And some of their fans will be critical of their transfer policies and how they approach it. And some will be critical of Cantony being so open and others won't. And that's where we are, isn't it, as Lincoln fans? Some are critical that we don't splash the cash as such. Some are critical we're holding fire in the transfer market. We'll be left with the dregs. I see that all the time, will we? No. Because come pre-season training, we might not have a left back in, we might. But once teams go into pre-season training, there's going to be an awful lot of players out there who suddenly think, got to drop my wage demands. Players are going to be on the phone to their agents saying, have you got me that deal? The agent's been asking for $5,000 a week. No takers. He's going to have to go back to interested clubs with 4, 3, 3.5, 2. That's negotiation. I think that's why more business gets done during pre-season. Of course, in an ideal world, you get all your business done and you get everybody in at pre-season. But early business does not necessarily mean success. Last season, who got all the early business done? Rotherham. Everyone's looking at Rotherham. They're going to go well. They've signed Johnson Clark-Harris. They've signed Cameron Humphreys. They've signed this player. They've signed that player. They're going to fly. Did they? No, they were shit. They were shit. They beat us twice, granted, but they were shit. So it doesn't always equate. Good business, early business doesn't equate to good business. Early business doesn't equate to value for money. And as Lincoln City fans, we do need value for money. How many times have I seen criticism of Tyler Walker was a waste of money because he got injured? Lee Angle, when he came in on loan, what a waste of budget. When you're trying to have tight budgets, why are we signing players like that? So imagine if we went out and did all our business early and we got in Jamie Robsons and Chris Maguires and Hakiba Delicans. I mean, they weren't all early business, by the way, but do you know what I mean? It's easy to be critical because you could be critical from either way. Early business, you'll be critical because we're jumping the gun, we're rushing. No early business, you can be critical because we're left with the dregs. Early business goes badly, you can be critical that we rushed into it. Late business goes badly, you can be critical we waited too long. If you come from a position of negativity, and let's be brutally honest, many of our supporters do, I say, no, that's wrong, sorry, I have to restructure that. A selection of our supporters do. I'm not saying many, but a selection do. You can just be critical about whatever it is you want to be. Get to 7th in the table, just fail to make the playoffs. Well, it's a missed opportunity, best opportunity in years. Next season, when people say that, I was just picking up on that. I actually saw, I won't say who it was, a poster, because I went back on Twitter. I didn't want to embarrass him because I'm done with public feuds with people. But when we went out of dropped out of the playoffs on the last game of last season, the season before last rather, it was best opportunity we'll have in ages, so close, can be seen as a failure. Bear in mind, we came from 10, 12 points behind to get there, but it was a failure. Yeah, all right. Then this season, same poster, we finish 11th, weakest League One for years. What, weaker than last year? Which one is it? If we'd got in the playoffs and failed, it'll be missed opportunity, couldn't do the 90 minutes, blah, blah, blah. For some people, the only level of success is promotion. For me, it's the main level of success. But after that, success can be measured in other ways. Success isn't always about being promoted. I was listening to, well, actually, it's funny enough, it's on the Hard Truth, the Bradford fan. What are your aspirations for this season? He said, 5th from bottom. Darren McCanty said, a club your size, 5th from bottom. That's disappointing. You've got to have optimism. But is 5th from bottom good for Bradford this season? Promoted from League Two. Not great League Two either. Nobody really wanted to go up. Everybody led and then dropped away. Is just staying in the division a success? I think it was for Mansfield last season. Crawley didn't manage it. They would have classed it as success. So what does success look like for us? A decent transfer window? Don't even know what that means. You don't know what that means until a year, 2 years down the line. We can look back now and go the summer of 2021 after the playoffs, not a great transfer window. Had its highlights, but not great. You can look back at transfer windows like the one where we signed Jack Moylan, Joe Taylor and Conor McGrandles, really minimal moves. Good transfer window. You can look back at this winter's window. Signed James Collins, don't need to say any more. Good transfer window. Last summer, was it a good window or not? Probably remains to be seen. We need to see what Tom Bayliss's further impact is going to be. Tom Hamer looks like a good signing. We didn't waste money on a lot of loan players. So we don't know what success looks like there. For me, Lincoln City finishing in the top half next season would be success. Bit of a cup run. And by the way, FA Cup third round is a cup run. Even if all the draws that we get are away against teams at our level, it's a cup run. Success. I keep saying it. Lincoln City's performance last season, Michael Scabala's performance last season, industry-wide was viewed as a success. Peterborough United, probably not. But with the blows that they've taken over this summer, it feels like they're in a slightly tougher place. They've got to recruit, they've got players moved on, they can trade on that reputation. Poku's just gone to the SPFL. Jay Jones has gone to the Bundesliga, but reputation doesn't pay your bills, it doesn't pay your transfer fees, and it doesn't buy your players. And I feel for him in that respect. I really do. But what's happened to them this summer just proves things could be worse for us. And I just think Lincoln City fans, and I'm sure 99.9% of you all understand this, just need to be patient, sit tight, enjoy the fine summer weather, and see what happens. Things could be worse, things could be better. At the end of the day, we're an established League One side. And of all the sides in League One, there's only two. The two longest serving are us and Burton. Which of those two teams would you rather support right now? Lincoln City as an established League One face, or Burton Albion as a team that constantly flirt with relegation? We've only seriously flirted with relegation once in our stint in this division, and I think that is massive, absolutely massive. I have every confidence that this transfer window will bring up decent players, and it might bring up a flop or two, but that's just transfer windows for you. Anyway, thank you for watching. Not particularly interesting, I understand, but when